What if the scariest creatures in the entire Harry Potter universe weren't born evil at all? What if they were something else entirely before they became the hollow, soul-draining monsters we know from Azkaban? Today we're going deep into one of the darkest corners of the wizarding world to answer a question that most fans never even think to ask. Who were the Dementors before they became Dementors? Before we get there, let's make sure we fully understand just how terrifying these beings actually are, because I think a lot of people underestimate them. We see them in the movies, we see Harry falling off his broomstick in third year, and we move on. But the reality of what a Dementor does to a living person is genuinely one of the most disturbing concepts J.K. Rowling ever put into this story. Dementors feed on human happiness. Not in a metaphorical way, not in some vague spiritual sense. They literally drain every positive emotion, every warm memory, every last shred of hope from the people around them. The longer you spend near one, the more of yourself you lose. Your best memories start to fade. The things that used to make you smile feel distant and meaningless. What's left behind is only the worst moments of your life, playing on repeat with no relief in sight. And the physical experience of being near one is just as horrifying. The temperature drops, light dims. Even in the middle of a warm summer day, frost forms in the air when a Dementor is close. Their appearance matches the dread they produce. These are towering figures, over 2 meters tall, draped in dark, shredded cloaks. They have no eyes, they have no nose. Where a mouth should be, there's just a ragged, gaping hole. Their skin is greyish and slick, like something that has been submerged in water for weeks. They are genuinely one of the most unsettling creations in all of fantasy literature. And here's what makes them even more dangerous than most dark creatures. The more of them that gather in one place, the worse the effect becomes. It multiplies. It compounds. This is precisely why the Ministry of Magic chose them as the guardians of Azkaban, the wizarding prison. If you want to break someone psychologically without lifting a wand, just lock them in a building full of Dementors and wait. Wizards imprisoned there don't just suffer physically. They lose their minds, they lose their magical ability. In most cases, they simply stop being themselves in any meaningful way. Now here's the part that gets genuinely interesting. Dementors aren't just mindless beasts that happen to wander into a convenient role as prison guards. They are intelligent. They understand human language. They follow orders from those they choose to recognize as authority figures. They can communicate with each other, possibly telepathically, possibly through some kind of sound humans can't perceive. There is even reason to believe that Dementor leaders existed, beings within the species who negotiated directly with the Ministry of Magic and even with Voldemort himself. Think about that for a second. Voldemort didn't conquer the Dementors. He made a deal with them. That implies agency. That implies desire. That implies something that was once, perhaps, a great deal more. So where did they come from? This is where the lore gets murky and, honestly, where it gets most fascinating. The wizarding world has never given a clean, definitive origin story for Dementors, and that ambiguity is part of what makes them so compelling. One widely discussed theory among fans and lore enthusiasts is that Dementors were not created from nothing. They may have developed from human souls, or from some form of corrupted magical consciousness. The way they interact with human emotion and memory, the way they seem to understand and target psychological vulnerability, suggests a deeply human origin. They don't just drain happiness randomly. They home in on it with something that feels almost like recognition. Consider the Dementor's kiss, the most extreme thing one of these creatures can do. When a Dementor performs this act, it doesn't kill its victim. It takes their soul. The body remains alive and functional in the most basic sense. The person can eat, sleep, breathe. But there is nothing home anymore. No personality, no awareness, no self. The person is gone, even though the body persists. This is considered a fate worse than death in the wizarding world. And in the entire Harry Potter book series, the only confirmed use of the Dementor's kiss was on Bartemius Crouch Jr., though the threat of it hung over several other characters, including Sirius Black, Harry Potter himself, Dudley Dursley, and Marietta Edgecombe at different points in the story. The fact that Dementors can remove a soul so specifically and so completely points again to something profound about their nature. They understand what a soul is. They want it. That level of targeted hunger suggests something that once had a soul of its own. Now let's talk about one of the most famous moments involving Dementors, because it actually tells us a lot about their limitations and their nature. Sirius Black escaped from Azkaban, the only person ever to do so, and his method reveals something crucial. Dementors, for all their terrifying power over human consciousness, cannot perceive animals the same way. When Sirius transformed into his animagus form, a large black dog, the Dementors around him simply lost interest. He slipped through a partially opened cell door during feeding rounds, and for a significant period afterward, nobody even realized he was gone, because the Dementors hadn't registered his absence. They track human souls and human emotions. An animal registers differently, and apparently that difference is enough to fall completely beneath their notice. Defending yourself against a Dementor as a witch or wizard requires the Patronus charm, the Expecto Patronum spell. You must hold on to your single happiest memory with everything you have and channel it into a corporeal guardian that drives the Dementor back. But this is much harder than it sounds, and here's why that matters so much. People who have experienced the most trauma, people who have suffered the greatest losses, people who have spent years carrying pain, they find this nearly impossible. Not because they're weak in the conventional sense, but because their reservoir of happy memories is simply smaller. The Dementor exploits that. It is specifically devastating to those who have already been hurt the most. Even a physically strong, mentally healthy person who carries deep sadness may lose consciousness before they can cast a single spell. There's also the temporary comfort of chocolate, which Madame Pomfrey and Professor Lupin both recommend after Dementor encounters. It genuinely helps counteract the lingering cold and despair, though obviously it's not a long-term solution, and it offers no protection during actual exposure. After the Second Wizarding War ended and Voldemort was defeated at the Battle of Hogwarts, the Dementors, who had joined Voldemort's forces during the conflict, retreated back to Azkaban. Kingsley Shacklebolt, who became Minister of Magic following the war, made one of his earliest and most significant decisions as minister, removing Dementors from Azkaban entirely. The wizarding world had seen what happened when these creatures were given too much access to human beings, and the new ministry leadership determined that using them as guards was simply incompatible with any kind of just society. Where the Dementors went after their removal is not definitively established in the law, but it's reasonable to speculate that efforts were made to contain them somewhere remote, somewhere they could no longer reach the living world. And that is the tragic arc of the Dementor. Beings of unclear and possibly human origin, creatures of genuine intelligence and even political agency, reduced to tools of oppression by a ministry that prioritized fear as a mechanism of control. Whether they were once something else, something that suffered and transformed into hollowness over centuries, we may never know for certain. But the question itself is worth sitting with. Because in a world where love is the most powerful magic of all, the Dementor is the living embodiment of what happens when love is taken away entirely. Do you think Kingsley made the right call removing them from Azkaban? What do you believe they actually are at their origin? Drop your theory in the comments below because I want to read what you think about this. If you enjoyed this deep dive into the darkest corners of the wizarding world, hit subscribe and turn on notifications because we are going so much deeper into the lore that most people never explore. I'll see you in the next one.